Mr. Barua has joined.
Namaskar and good afternoon to all. I am Vikram Singh Bisht. I welcome you all on behalf of Elets Technomedia. Previously on this day, we have had opening session on IT applications and its implications on healthcare sector, and we have had a very great presentation by Rohit Jha from the Ayushman Bharat PMJAY, and we have just wrapped up our another panel discussion called the behavioral health infrastructure. Moving on to our last panel discussion of day 2, that is on innovations that help manage rising cost. I am very pleased to welcome Mr. Praveen Bisht, CIO, Amrita Hospitals, Delhi NCR. Welcome to you, sir. Mr. Rupak Barua, Director and Group CEO, Amri Hospitals. Joy Chakrabarti, COO, PD Hinduja Hospital, Mumbai. He is also moderating the session. And Dr. Ajay Kohli, Business Lead, Oncology, Collegium, Narayana Group. Dr. Alek Malik, Group CEO, Omni Hospitals. Dr. Venkatraman Sadugali, Director and CEO, Excel Multi-Speciality Hospital. I would again like to thank all the panelists and taking out time and joining in the session. Over to you, Mr. Joy.
Thank you very much, and it is my pleasure to chair and moderate this session. A very interesting session on innovations that help manage the rising cost. I think the CXO were present here managing multi-specialty hospitals, managing specialty hospitals, leading IT. So from all these corners, today we are very meticulously looking at the function that how do you manage and run your hospital, run your operations, and remain meaningful in this business, especially in last 16, 17 months during COVID. We have learned it probably in a much harder way, and we have learned that when you don't have regular patients, when your almost regular operations are shut, you manage COVID patients and other patients are not able to come to hospital, very fearful. You can take help of innovation. You can get into a complete change into the platform of digital. You can go for teleconsultations and many other things. So I'm not going to much dwell upon this, but all these innovations probably have helped us to come back to the normalcy, coming back to a situation where we are getting our confidence back. We have shown our strength, we have shown the courage. We have shown the way how Indian healthcare can even bounce back, and probably in few more weeks and months we will be back to normal. There are several fear statements. There are several things. In fact, in the initial video we have seen that the fear of third wave, hopefully it should not come, and we wish and pray that we should not face this. But I am sure that in last 15, 16 months we have learned, we have adopted things which will make us to remain meaningful in this business. So, with this initial few words, I can tell you we have esteemed line of speakers, panelists who are going to talk about talk on this subject and going to be relevant to their areas, and which will be great takeaways for the people who are attending this session. So to begin with, I will request Mr. Rupak Barua to start with, and he has multiple hospitals in the eastern region, and has a very strong operations base in Calcutta and other parts in the eastern India, and have done extremely well during COVID, pre-COVID, and post-COVID time. So I'm going to ask him a question that with this pandemic situation where the revenue was shrinking, though now we are coming back to normalcy, how are you managing costs? I want a broader framework of that, so you remain still sustainable in operations and manage and get prepared for a better tomorrow. So over to Mr. Barua.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Whenever we are talking about the cost, I think this is one of the most important discussion today. This is your how the healthcare sector they are managing actually the cost part. This is an extremely important discussion. This is it is not only for the organization to survive, but yes, of course, we are dealing with the patient, so we need to look into the patient's affordability part as well. So that's a very catch-22 situation. One way the cost is increasing. So now, if we see, regardless of country or culture, you will find the cost of healthcare have a tendency to rise over faster than overall cost, which means that your healthcare consumes an ever increasing share of GDP worldwide. It is there. We all know the way this cost is increasing. Now, in addition, one thing is also there that many healthcare systems also struggle with great inequality of in access, one part, and as well as the difference of quality provided. Because quality is such a way that we cannot measure, is that not measurable. So that is one treatment to other treatment, there is a varies, same treatment, but one hospital to other hospital, one doctor to other doctor, it varies. Now, it's a very it's not measurable, but also distinguishes one treatment from other, and how can is the quality can we can outcome can be quantified. That is also a very big area of concern in today's situation. Now, in particularly, this is going on for quite some time. Now, as Joy, you were mentioning about that, how we were managing the cost. See, in many ways, if we see that it is a that we are talking about the cost contain, many approaches have been tried. But how we could manage this post-COVID situation in terms of financial viability of a hospital, which is one of the most major concern. That is that there are a couple of areas of concern in any healthcare that we all, wherever we are working. The one is the operating expenses, and the other part is the human resources. Because human resources, the payout, that's the doctors and the staff payout, actually it is increasing ever increasing, because you know that the demand and supply gap, always there is a huge demand of manpower, and there is a supply is less in terms of skilled manpower. The skilled doctors, I mean the crowd pulling doctors, there is a huge shortage. So whenever we are going for the survival, that we'll have to have good quality doctors, because ultimately end of the day, as I was mentioning, is the quality is not measurable, but to some extent, to make it measurable, or you will have to deliver the quality outcome, the clinical outcome. That is the most important part, that you will have to strengthen your the team, the skilled manpower you must have in your system, and that is a cost involved. So that is one part. There is the other part, is, as I had mentioned, operating cost, and particularly during this COVID situation, what we could see, that is a supply chain absolutely got disrupted, and there is a additional cost has come up in this system. There is your lot of that your safety gears and all, that is the additional cost has come up. So that is the burden has increased to this your overall healthcare system. The other part also, you will have to find that whenever you make the budget of the hospital, that how you will make, how will make your cash flow system, because every hospital you will have to have a proper cash flow system, because end of the day you will have to have some surplus, whether you call it surplus, whether you call it profit, whether you call it EBITDA, but whatever way, there must be some surplus, because for which you can plow back, because you will have to invest in this your new system, new equipment, because medical science is very, very fast moving. There are a lot of things is changing very fast, so you will have to invest for better quality outcome, clinical outcome. So that you must have some kind of a surplus. So you will have to manage everything. Again, end of the day, you will have to have surplus. So how we could manage, actually, that is a major part that we could see. That is first is the human resources, that the percentage wise, if you see that if you can support some of the percentage, if you can reduce the human resources. So how we could manage is, of course, which were the stream or the specialty which is not required, we have discontinued that kind of services. That is one part. And the second part is the multi-skilling. So one person is looking for another different works. So the multi-skilling, the training that we have given, and we were the optimal usage of the manpower that we had made, and that way we had reduced the cost. The second part also, you see, there is the doctor's cost as well. Doctor's cost also the same way we had managed. That is your different doctors, different working in different situation. So we had to manage, that is the optimal utilizations, particularly in the junior category doctors, and we had put them in such a way that they can do much more work and all. So optimal utilizations of the manpower, where we have reduced the cost, operational efficiency that we had made, and where we had reduced the cost, wherever there is no excess, your power cost, your whatever way this your operational, whatever the your parameters comes under the operational part, that we had control, and that's the extreme way that we have control, that is also we have reduced. The third part, what we had made, actually, because we could manage the manpower, that is the one is the mostly we had introduced the digitizations or the technology we have used to reduce the manpower cost, to reduce the unnecessary appointment of this your additional ward boys, your nurses, and all. We have reduced in many ways. So your uses of the technology we have introduced, so that we can reduce the operational cost. We have reduced this your supply chain management. We had strengthened this our supply chain management part. We have reduced this your cost of the consumables. We have reduced the cost of the your medications, unnecessary uses of medications, more uses of the generic medicine in terms of your low cost profile. Because you see, healthcare is also additional burden we have. There is a low cost corporates which we have, because each and every state they have their own some schemes, and where in Bengal also we have a very strong one scheme, which is a huge the patients are coming, where there is a 40-50% is the less cost that you will have to provide. So all those things, until and unless you have very strong kind of a operational process involved, or you have your consumables you are not controlling in terms of your single-use devices and all, so that you will not be able to survive. So these are the main factors that we have introduced, and we could manage our that our group in a very very sustainable way. We are very in a very positive way we could move, and both given this your cash flow we could manage, and in return the patient's outcome or the patient's quality care or the clinical outcome, all we could manage. So both we could convince our my promoters, or in case of our customers or the patients or the doctors, all we could manage. So this way actually we had managed COVID time, post COVID, still we are managing. Overjoy.
Thank you, Mr. Barua. It is a very, elaborated, detailed. I must say, at this juncture, the way you have narrated that human resource cost, your process alignment, looking at the materials, I think you have touched upon all the major components which are, having impact on the cost, and you have worked on all these dimensions. Now, from there, I move on to my next panelist, Dr. Alek Malik. He also manages a chain of hospitals where I'll be looking from him some sorts of, practical innovations, the solutions, what he or his group has made. And along with that, I want to hear that, so far so long, what we do, we look at what is the kind of cost, what it is percentage to the expenses, percentage to the revenue, and all we calculate. But how do you do this benchmarking? How do you know that even if you are in the lowest category, you are the best, or is there any scope for improvement? So these are the two questions to you, Dr. Malik. Over to you, Dr. Malik.
Thanks, Joy, and thanks, Elets. This is a very interesting topic. I wish that it would be discussed more often. I was just interviewing a candidate from one of the top B schools last year, and he had a healthcare MBA, and he didn't know anything about cost benchmarks. This is true across the board. You ask anybody, do you have cost benchmarks? They would be having some local benchmarks, and these things are hardly discussed, these things are hardly published. The published numbers are weird. And most of us who do have benchmarks, which we have collected across our working professional life by talking to CFOs, talking to various CEOs, we know that benchmarks do exist and they are realistic, and the only way to realistically be on top of your cost control strategy is to know the benchmarks. If you don't know, for example, that in India for a multi-specialty hospital, your doctor's cost on a blended basis should not be more than 20% of your revenue, then you're missing something, right? And then once you know the benchmarks, say, okay, my doctor's cost should be 20%, my staff cost should be 20%, including junior doctors, my drugs and disposable costs should be this percent, my cost for delivering my utilities and my maintenance should be this much, then only you can, because you're tracking, you're basically fighting for every 0.5% when you're coming to EBITDA. So unless you know the benchmarks again, and you won't know where I'm overspending. You just won't know where you're overspending. I mean, when we 3-4 years earlier, when we started this whole exercise with Omni Hospitals, and we basically aligned ourselves to the benchmarks. We said, okay, this is not good, this is not good, this is not good. We need to fix this, right? And many of the times it may be just that let's look at employee cost. Now, I've heard leaders tell me, oh, we haven't lost employees, right? We have employees who are working with us for the last 30 years. That may be a good thing for a certain employee, but that's a bad thing if it covers all your employees, because obviously every year you will keep giving raises to your employees. Your cost per employee is going to rise. So it's always there. We talk about a healthy attrition. We talk about, I'm a small hospital. For me, a particular category of employee, I cannot pay more than 30 to 40,000 per month, for example. Similarly, if the same person goes to Apollo Hospital, he might ultimately earn 75,000 rupees, but I cannot afford to pay him 75. So, once he has crossed my upper limit of pay band for that particular role and he expects a raise, I said, look boss, I cannot pay you anything more than that. You are most welcome to stay with me at this level. Otherwise, I will give you a very brilliant reference and you go to a bigger hospital. I will hire somebody else, right. So, I keep on controlling my cost per employee, right. And so many such good people have left from our organization and gone and joined a bigger organization at a much higher pay, which I cannot afford, right. You must be very clear for every employee role what's the minimum or the maximum that you will pay, and this should be made very clear to everybody, right. Now, once you have your benchmarks in play, I can always discuss the benchmarks that we have internally. People can discuss that threadbare, but these are benchmarks which are virtually, I have seen in every hospital, every region, they follow the similar kind of benchmarks. Doctors, of course, surgeons will take away more, physicians will take away less, but generally doctors will take away 20%. On blended rate, some of our hospitals are doing 18% for doctors. Some of our hospitals are doing as much as 28%. And these are the places where this is still a work in progress, how to get it down. There are many ways of getting it down. If you don't have an input problem, if you don't have you have enough patients coming to you, it's always better to have doctors on fixed price, right? So that otherwise, if you are dependent on the doctor to getting your patients, you'll have to pay variable. Once you start paying variable, it starts going up. We have had hospitals where we're paying virtually 40% to the doctors, right? So it's not that you don't want to pay doctors, but then you want to pay doctors in a manner which is sustainable, right? I've known hospitals where I obviously cannot name them, but I've known hospitals where doctors are paid less than 20%, but they are also getting enough money and hospitals also getting enough money, right? As somebody said, that hospitals need to make enough margin money so that they continue to grow. So one is doctor, one is staff, the third is drug and disposable. Now, I for the life of me, I can never understand why hospitals don't go into group purchase. A big hospital chain, of course, has some ability to have some heft when it comes to signing purchase contracts. But what about smaller chains, 5 hospitals, 6 hospitals? They don't have that kind of heft that Apollo Hospital might have, right? So why can't Omni hospital with 800 beds, another hospital with 1000 beds, another hospital with another 1000 beds, maybe operating in the same geography, they all get together and purchase drugs and disposables together? That's a very big cost, right? And every percentage that you knock off from that, this is common practice in America, but is yet to take off in India. Now there are third parties which are coming up, which are kind of saying that I will act on your behalf as group purchase. That is, something is better than nothing. But then the hospitals themselves together then can band up together and create a group purchase organization instead of going to a third party, because the third party will take its own costs, right? So there's a huge opportunity available right now, right today, to create a group purchase organization between 3 like-minded hospitals or 4 like-minded hospitals, to reduce your costs. And another big opportunity is when you are looking at big medical capex. Now there is a big cartel there. Prices are all controlled. I can never understand why a patient monitor which has as much electronics, if not less, as a desktop computer which costs 30,000 rupees, why a patient monitor should call 1 lakh rupees or 2 lakh rupees is beyond me. The cheapest monitor, a Chinese monitor, is probably 90,000 rupees. But then these are prices controlled by a cartel. But then if you have If you once again go through a group, you can always drive down prices. There are lots of prices are so much inflated. Lots of cost to us is so much inflated, you know, in terms of equipment, in terms of drugs, in terms of so many things, right? So we need to be very wise when it comes to negotiating prices for drugs, negotiating prices for equipment. There's so much margin which can be released over there. And by the way, there's so much corruption also there. We all know that. The guys who are negotiating prices for drugs, the guys who are negotiating prices for the CT scan and MRI that you're buying, we need to get involved because there's so much money which can be saved over there. So cost reductions, uh, somebody is going to talk, of course, about IT systems. There's so many simple IT solutions which help us reduce cost in many different areas of the hospital operations, right? So I think, Joy, I answered some of the questions, some of the queries that you raised. I'll be happy to answer some more.
Thank you, Dr. Malik. And I can tell you that some of the hospitals where you are giving 40% to the consultant, they are very happy. And today, after hearing 15% group will be feeling little upset. And very good idea of the, you told about group purchasing, and even if it is not through a third party, maybe two, three hospitals can join together and they can do that. This is some of the very, I should say, daring thoughts, and probably time only can bring all this to us over a period of time, and we can start seeing the result subsequently. So, thank you for sharing the thoughts. So, now I move on to my next panelist, Mr. Praveen Bist. He's from a very reputed hospital, and he is the CIO for the hospital, Amrita Hospital. So, we spoke from the CEO's point of view that how and what they are doing in terms of cost. But being a IT professional, can you tell me that what IT solution can do to reduce this cost? And I'm sure in this age of technology as well as digitization, this IT can play a major role.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Joy, for having us here. And very well said that IT does have a very important role, especially in this era when we are talking about patients not wanting to come physically into your hospital. So how do you still engage with them? How do you still manage, make sure the revenue is coming? So if you look from the total IT solution perspective, maybe sometimes the budget we might have to increase for the IT infrastructure. Reason being, we are increasing the IT services. So I would rather change the question more from, instead of making it cost control, but operate more efficiently, and that is how I would like to answer this. So on one side, one way to adopt the IT solution to be more efficient is try to automate some of the processes if possible. And when I said if possible, the reason is there are different kind of processes and not everything lends itself to automation. So you must have all heard of RPA, robotic process automation. It's a term very loosely used, but essentially it means that some of the low hanging fruit, so to speak, some of the uh, processes which are repetitive, can we use some automated tools to take care of it? So that's the one part of automation. The second, which is more, I would say, not so low hanging, but definitely still very valuable, is what we call use of AI, use of machine learning. So we have artificial intelligence. There are a lot of solutions available. There are systems available which can kind of improve with time. So they use the concept of machine learning. So I have seen applications where the doctor notes can be dictated with far greater accuracy than in the past. So it improves with time as there is a more and more usage. It's able to do, because this has been one challenge I'm sure a lot of hospitals face is adoption of IT, adoption of EMR. When it comes to doctors, clinicians, it's always a challenge, and rightly so. They also have reasons why it is challenging. And what we have used is this time where the patient volume has been low across the board. So we have utilized that time to train them, to engage them more and more so that they are more comfortable. Because earlier they would say, oh, I have so many patients. How do I spend time learning the systems? So this being kind of a low tide, we have utilized that to leverage it in our favor by engaging them more effectively and hoping as the patient volume goes up, they continue to use EMR, continue to adopt the paperless, so to speak. I say less paper instead of paperless because we all know that in a real world there will be some paper generated in the hospital. So that is one side of how we have engaged. The other part is make sure that all your reaching out to the potential patient, so to speak. So be it your website, be it your search engine optimization, be it your display ads. So now we have to make sure that all of these are responsive. It should work. The website which works in a desktop has to work on a mobile. If it doesn't, you're losing out because more and more patients are turning towards mobile. More and more patients want those services to be available on their hand. So we have to make sure we invest in the right kind of technologies which gives you the leverage going forward. So we have invested in that heavily, and we can see that we're able to attract a lot of newer patient, which was not the case earlier. A larger chunk was repeat patient, but now we are seeing that upturn in terms of being able to attract, being able to reach out. So we are not only able to control the marketing cost, but also engaging heavily from the e-marketing perspective. So we are also looking at the CRM solution. So lost businesses can be taken care of by making sure you engage with the customer, which is the patient in this case, and you continuously follow up with them and ensure that every possible revenue opportunity is converted. And that way, not only you engage the customer, you gain their loyalty, plus you take care of your revenue as well. So those have been some of the added initiatives that we have taken. And I would like to kind of uh, also add upon the earlier speaker's point of view on the supply chain. So supply chain, if we use a good IT solution, a lot of it can be automated. So in any hospital, you're talking about 15 to 20,000 SKUs. It's not a small number. And then you talk about different vendors that you're dealing with. So the permutation combination can easily exceed over 40, 50,000. So now if you have a good system, it's able to do some VED analysis, it's able to do ABC analysis, and able to give you a more visual picture of where you are with respect to your inventory, where you are with respect to your vendor supplies. So this has really helped us to be on top of the game. Even though there has been disruptions in the supply chain, we are all aware of that. It has been a tough time overall for the industry, and these are some of the initiatives that we have implemented and managed to ensure that we are more efficient in the running. Even though we might have increased our IT budget a little bit, but it has helped us in the long run.
So thank you for this updation. And if I can ask you that, what is the magnitude or kind of increase in IT budget has taken place to meet all your requirement? If you can that share that with us.
Yeah, so we have increased by the earlier budget. We was I won't give you the exact number, but we increased around 5% on the existing budget. So we have gone overboard a little bit, but it has given us the right returns.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing this. And I'm sure that with this changed environment and this changing scenario, depending on IT, digital is going to be the need of the hour. And some of the examples, what has been shared by Mr. This, I think it is going to be really a game changer for many of us. So with this, I move on to my, the next panelist, Dr. Ajay Kohli from Narayana Group and dealing with the oncology. So, oncology as a specialty is a highly demanding. The market is expanding. Everything is very, from business point of view, very nice to hear. But in oncology, you have in one hand huge capex intensive uh, operations. On the other hand, you have the price control, which is reducing or minimizing the margins, contribution margins. So, in this scenario, how do you, as a business lead for this oncology business of Narayana Group, how do you manage your cost and what are the innovations you have brought in? Over to Dr. Ajay Kohli.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's a privilege to be here and speak about the cost factor which impacts all the hospitals basically. So, Narayana per se has mastered this supply chain management, as Dr. Alok was mentioning that it's a big unit. We have around 25 units in India. We have a group purchase policy. Uh, but coming to the other point which Dr. Alok was mentioning, that group purchase power, basically it is not possible in India right now to do that because every hospital has different patient base. So Narayana per se was always looking at masses. We wanted to go to the bigger masses who are not able to afford the treatment, and we kind of sustain our system by charging the cash patients more. So it will be difficult for hospitals to share data that how many patients and what is our payer category. Now coming to oncology per se, oncology is a very capex intensive field. We have to put this radiation machines to come up with a comprehensive center. Robots are a big thing right now. So the only thing we can do from the scratch is that the segmentation of a hospital has to be pure. What happens in hospitals is that the moment we grow up, all of us are looking for more patients. That's a one sure short thing to reduce the cost. More patients means less cost. But somehow I've seen that over the span of time, the hospitals don't stay true to their segmentation, which is the rock bed of any kind of business. Other businesses they stay true to that. Let us take any other industry. Let us take smartphones. Like Xiaomi and all, they're making smartphones for middle class people, or let us say they make it for the lower socioeconomic strata. And then there's an iPhone which is straight away targeted at the rich people. Now, what happens with hospitals is that in between we try to shift to newer segment of patients, and then we want better things, then we go into this arms race. So I'll just tell you that let us say this Apollo group has got into proton centers. Now the other idea is that we should also get into proton, but the idea is that we have to follow clinical protocols. Our innovation should be more on process based rather than the content based. The idea is not every patient who undergoes proton therapy will have same will have better outcomes. So the clinical protocols, if the innovation is done on those standards, that someone who can get better with the CRT or an IMRT doesn't need proton. So the idea is to work on the protocols first. That will be a very content based innovative approach, that this person requires this only. Second aspect will be the margins are very thin in drugs which are new and novel. All original molecules, all molecules which are actually promised to be doing wonders to patients, they're very expensive and the margins are less in that. Now, biosimilars in India per se, I believe in last 10 years only around 10 molecules have been introduced. So that doesn't help any hospital. That 10 biosimilars have been introduced, and we stay with the original molecules which are expensive. Now, cost is a very like a fluidic situation. We are trying to reduce cost for patients also because we are competitive, and we want to stay profitable also because otherwise we'll go out of the survival will become difficult. Uh, So all the innovations which we do normally, I'll just tell you that some of the drugs which are being innovated in pharmaceutical industry, or let us say molecular diagnostics also, which has come in COVID times, all the innovations are all content based. They actually increase the cost other than decreasing the cost of healthcare for survival. Cost can be decreased only by process based content. Particular to oncology, what I keep on looking at as Dr. Alok also mentioned, that the analytics have to be perfect. You need to have a close control over your costs. I just give a small example that one of our units, our contribution margin had gone down to 30%. We actually immediately went to that place and saw what is happening. That it cannot go down that much because fixed costs are too much for any healthcare industry. So the analytics, every hospital I believe should invest their analytics so they can keep a control track of their cost. One, I have already mentioned that we should stay pure to a segmentation of patients. We treat more middle class masses. We have a big market. We should stay true to that to reduce the cost. The moment we try to treat rich patients or try to go to a better arms race to counter with the hospitals, that will be very cost intensive. And trust me, the capex cost is not recovered in many machines of our hospitals. Uh, One thing is clinical engineering, which we are very big on. We need to invest a lot in clinical engineering departments. Normally, that's not the case in India. If your clinical engineering is good, trust me, a lot of cost can be saved on the contracts of machines which are not working, which frequent breakdowns are a thing. The model has changed quite a lot in last 2 3 years, where companies have started supporting us in big ways. But still, having a very robust clinical engineering departments in hospitals makes life very easy for us. One more pain point is outsourcing. Normally, healthcare organizations as well as hospitals, they are averse to outsource their departments. Because we think that we have a lot of control over quality. I think we need to have a more holistic look into what can be outsourced. That is only possible if you have a control over your analytics. That where are we spending more? And we have found out amazing places where we thought that we are spending much. Uh, we realized we were not spending there much, and some places we were spending a lot. So I really don't call it cutting. I call it cost optimization. We have to spend more on patient experience. We have to spend more on those areas, but we focus more on, let us say, BMEs. Our budgets are more inclined towards aesthetics. Um One of the things which was mentioned was healthcare, the manpower cost. Manpower cost, induction, job trainings, and all, they take out a lot of time. We want a healthy attrition rate. That brings the cost down. But actually, the cost of inducting new employees is much more than actually letting go of an old employee. So, as Dr. Alok again said, yes, cost is a thing. Wherever we can, we do try to retain a staff by providing trainings. By having more things which will help in retention of employees. So that is one of the things. One more things which bothers us is scheduling of employees. Normally whenever we see a bed strength, on the basis of that bed strength, the employees are hired. You need these many beds and these many employees are needed on the basis of bed to patient ratio or patient to nursing ratio and all those things. I think we should move on to the more robust moving averages model. Where we see the data of last 3 months and this was the occupancy, and according to that our staffing should be done. Now it is very difficult that I cannot go and hire staff in 3 months again. I think in that we can actually use extra hours or overtimes and all, but we should look at optimizing scheduling and staffing. With analytics, IT can play a big role in that. We invest more in EMRs, EHRs right now, but that is one thing which can help us a lot. Uh, and then payment models for doctors, as other doctors also mentioned that we are looking at a fixed pay salary if you have institutional patients. But the doctor retention becomes very poor in that. So as Dr. Alok mentioned, we have cost benchmarking. In some departments, we will go overboard, definitely. But in some departments, we do keep a big control over things. Like let's say physicians, so we go around, we stay around 7 8%. We have a cost benchmarking, but in case of surgeons, it goes up to 28% also. So we are coming up with very innovative models in the term of outcomes. So like in radiology and lab diagnostics and all, we follow something like TAT, the quality of report. And on the basis of that, we are paying our doctors how many scans you have seen, how many this thing different modalities you have moved on into. So there's some many innovative models, but again, I believe that we have to keep a tight control over our contribution margins. That has to be a month-on-month exercise. The moment you go overboard that, you have to look for alternatives. Alternatives are available for us. So, and again, segmentation. I keep on sticking to that word that our segmentation has to be very pure. We cannot get into arms race with other hospitals. We cannot get into competitive nature where we spend a lot. We have to optimize our machines, our equipment, and that is only possible if we stick to our segmentation of population. And for Narayana Group, it is the masses. That's the biggest bracket of chunk of patients we have. We will stick to that. We will see if something has to be done. There's some very good models in some hospitals. My friends have hospitals which were designed on the premise that we will only treat scheme patients. They did drastic cost cutting. Tertiary hospitals can't do that because we already made behemoth of hospitals, and now we are looking for patients in every segment. We want Aishuman, we want middle class, we want rich people. Not possible. So right now we can't overchange it. We are working around. It's a daily thing. But if we can turn it around, if we start something new, we have to stay true to segmentation of patients which we're targeting. Yeah. That's my take on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dovalli. I think two, 3 points you have mentioned here, which we have not discussed so far. You mentioned about the right test, right guidelines, right technology, position for the patient, which indirectly reduces the patient cost burden. At the same time, you have the right technology at the right place. Secondly, the analytics. How do you use the analytics and how do you manage that and take that input of the analysis to take your own decision? And of course, all of us we know that what kind of cost model, cost consciousness is there in Narayana Group, and I'm sure that you are going to fine tune it and going to make it more impactful for the patients, for the community. Next and final panelist, Dr. Venkat Ramana, who is the director and CEO of Excel Multispeciality Hospital. And my question, I think we have heard so far so long from so many panelists. So I'm going to ask him to share some newer solutions, model innovations, what you feel is really going to help us in this long run. So can you share some of those, and in practical sense, which can be a very good takeaways for the participants. So over to Dr. Venkat.
Thank you, Mr. Joy, and thank you for inviting me, Elets, and the team. It's a very interesting sessions. Uh, so, I'm a clinical radiologist. I do a lot of CT and MRI scan reporting. So perhaps radiology is one of the most capital intensive area within the hospital that you can have. Running an organization, running a hospital in India is not an easy job because we are considered essentially as a commercial organization, just like a factory doing, Apple iPhones or MacBooks. So strangely, unfortunately, the government considers us as a commercial organizations, and hence we have to pay commercial taxes on everything, including water, electricity, etc. I completely agree with Dr. Alok when he said that group purchase is a way forward. Group of hospitals or a chain of hospitals going to a big conference where industry is present, where all the presentations happen regarding their equipment, regarding their advanced technology. And that's a good place where a group can negotiate for big equipment, especially related to radiology, where, as I said, it is very capital intensive, each machine costing millions of dollars. And along with that, I would like to add is that you can always squeeze out the best in terms of AMCs. You can ask them to include AMCs for the big machines, because running them is a very expensive affair. Not only just the pure running part, but also the time factor when a machine goes wrong or when a machine gets sick. The time factor and all the patients which are backlogged during that time factor is also should be taken into account. Then also you can negotiate on maintenance, upgrades, and software, etc. Also, streamlining the supply chain management is something which we should all try to concentrate on, and also and together with inventory management, because we know that things like areas like pharmacy and all, some of the hospitals are being used as warehouses. So we should try to negotiate on all these aspects in detail, perhaps as a group or as a consortium with the suppliers. Now, let me just stick to my own field, which is radiology. Uh, so there is a capital cost, there is an operations cost, maintenance cost, and also there is a salvage cost running in thousands and thousands of dollars. So very, very expensive machines. Now, if I want to divide radiology, I would divide into two big areas regarding cost. One is the cost of the hardware itself, like machines and all, and the cost which we cannot see, which is mainly software related. In fact, most of the operations in radiology can come under software. Uh, so hardware, we did discuss a bit about how capital intensive it is and how purchase orders should group purchase and inventory management should happen. But regarding the soft part, which we cannot see, that includes maintenance of machines, software upgrades, management of waiting lists. Because if there's a patient who is cancelled today, I'm losing that slot, and the MRI machine is kept free for that 1 hour. So I'm paying my staff as a salary to continue scanning the patients. But if the patient is not there for one slot, I'm losing my money. It's costing me more than my revenue for that one particular slot. So for this, there are solutions being coming up of late, and AI is one of the solutions which is being used. And in fact, I myself work with a couple of AI companies, internationally renowned. One is from US, one from Israel, and one from India. So AI in radiology is not just about reporting aspect, which is well established since the last 1 decade, but also there are many other things like management of the patient appointments. Then you have NLP, natural language processing. You have virtual recognition of your voices. Then you have things like Amazon Web Service, which can help you cross barriers and quickly communicate with the patients, with the radiographers, with the clinicians very fast. And all those can be recorded for future references, because they are all legally bound whenever we discuss about a patient. And coming to the main part, which is AI in radiology, so the image pattern recognition, which is now well established. Now, 5-6 years ago, people were saying that AI, if it gets established in radiology, radiologists will lose their jobs. And I think that's utter nonsense. And perhaps people who have said that do not know how radiology works, and how business works, and how the patient-centric organization should continue working. So essentially, what happens is AI, in short, increases the productivity of any radiologist. So if you have 100 X-rays, it's very intensive on the human eye to go through 100 X-rays in a couple of hours. And when that happens, when the intensity increases, you tend to make mistakes. And especially if you take the example of other countries, the Western countries with whom I work very closely. I'm a consultant for UK NHS and Ireland Medical Council. And I regularly do scans. I used to go there every month before COVID, but now it's mostly remote. But what happens is that one X-ray which you miss can cost millions of pounds to the organization, in terms of patients giving a feedback. Then there's a process of addressing the complaints. Then you might have to pay some compensation. You may have to employ lawyers to do that. So it's endless amount of work, manpower, cost, and cost of opportunity as well. You waste a lot of time in dealing with all those things. So to a large extent, these are coming up to India, and in the future, these may be well established. Patient complaining against us, then consumer courts or high courts and supreme courts taking a strong view regarding compensations, etc. We already know what is happening in our world. Then we also have the insurance sector, where it's a very protocol driven, and you need to have all your parameters correctly done, whether you have given contrast, for example, for that patient, if not, why. So there are numerous other factors also coming into play. What I want to say is, mistakes are less well tolerated in the current world, and it's going to become more and more stricter, and they are going to be costly for the organization. So AI, if you get into the organization, machine learning algorithms, they will not only give you a good report, but they will also highlight. And in fact, the highlight part is a bit more nowadays, in terms of it is giving out more false positives, which is good, because we essentially want to check those false positive and make sure that they are not abnormal, and then confirm the findings and give a report to the. So in one way, we are one solving the patient's care process, where you deliver excellent care for the patient. You only have one scan, and the patient gets diagnosis, then treatment immediately, not wasting a lot of resources, time, and energy. On the other hand, you're preventing so much of damage to happen for the patient and for the hospital in a broader sense. um, so so that's what I wanted to say. And also, regarding the analytics, Dr. Ajay Kohli very nicely mentioned in his own department of oncology. Every department needs to have an analytics, every major departments, because the data is coming over thick and thin every day. So it has to be a dynamic analysis, not just 2 year back analysis and you work, because things change a lot. The demographics change a lot, people's mentality changes a lot. We have seen what COVID has done to many patients. Rather than bringing them to hospitals, they are all preferring to be online. And also predictive analysis, how things are going to progress in the near future, what the patient needs are, how diagnosis should be fast, easy, and higher quality. These kinds of data are very basic nowadays, and in Western world, every major hospital has got analytics, with which all the CEOs and CFOs work with. So unless you have this in place, two major things, which are cost control as well as patient care delivery systems, they will be always under scrutiny. And to get these under your good nature, good outputs, good clinical outcomes, you got to do these things which I just described. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Dr. Venkat, you have very nicely explained the role of this, artificial intelligence, and you mentioned also about data. So for analytics part of it, and I'm sure the way you narrated that the fear earlier that if this all happens, then probably radiologists are going to lose the job, and that is not the truth. I have short, running short of time. I need to close it at 3:15, but only I can tell that I had such a nice, diversified panel, and each one of them have highlighted the areas of their expertise and their choice. I can only tell that if we adopt, may not be 100%, but 50% of whatever has been suggested, probably we can manage this rising cost situation, and which will help us in terms of keeping healthcare under the accessible for the people who are looking for it. We need to remember that in Western world, with the rising cost, the quality issues, the kind of challenges each of us have come across, we have seen the way each person they are facing the rising cost of health insurance, rising cost of healthcare, which is getting pushed to the ultimate consumers. And during that, when there is some sorts of gap between the expectations and the reality, there is a huge burden of consumer cases. Consumer, they are expecting kind of reimbursement from the hospitals for this non-conformance. I hope and I wish we stick to these practices and don't allow our country to reach a situation when we also become some of these Western world's model. So hope that all the participants have got enough inputs and takeaways. It was individually, personally for me, it was a good learning session. I want to thank all the panelists once again, and I want to thank Elets for giving me this opportunity today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Thank
Joy
you.
Chakraborty, and all the eminent panelists for this wonderful discussion. We would like to present the certificate of gratitude uh, as appreciation and gratitude to all of you. Mr. Praveen Best, CIO of Amrita Hospitals, Delhi NCR. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Rupak Barua, Director and Group CEO, AMRI Hospitals. Thank you so much, Mr. Rupak. Mr. Joy Chakraborty, CEO of PD Hinduja Hospital, Mumbai, for the wonderful moderation as the chair. Thank you so much, Mr. Joy. And Dr. Ajay Kohli, Business Lead for Oncology Collegium, Narayana Group. Thank you so much, Dr. Ajay. Dr. Alok Malik, Group CEO of Omni Hospital. Thank you so much, Dr. Alok. And Dr. Venkat Ramana Sudigali, Director and CEO of Excel Multi Speciality Hospital. Thank you so much, Dr. Venkat Ramana. And here we close this session, and also we close formally the second edition of Hospital Infrastructure Summit. These 2 days were wonderful. We had eminent leaders from hospital sector participating here, from government, corporate, and civil societies, discussing on various aspects of how to transform hospital infrastructure with technology and other sort of initiatives. So here we thank all our NAPH. We thank our partners, our audience, our speakers for being with us. And here we formally close this second edition of Hospital Infrastructure Summit. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.